Good evening. It is 5:30 PM on Tuesday, October 21st, 2025, and this regular meeting of the Sandpoint Planning and Zoning Commission is now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I am Commission Chairman Mose Dunkel presiding. Also present are Commissioners Grant Simmons, Wayne Benner, Scott Torpy, Reed Weber, and Ivan Remar is absent. If we would all stand, we would now recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First off, do we have any commission members who have any announcements or reports? No. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes and consent calendar is approved. Okay, we're having some technical difficulties with some stuff tonight, so we're going to go back to that.
Okay. Commissioner Torpy, did you want to say something?
I was just gonna vote aye.
Okay. All right, moving on. Next, we have matters from the public or general public announcements or comments. We will proceed with that. If you would like to speak on a topic included on the agenda that is not a public hearing or another topic pertinent to city business, now is your opportunity to do so. If you wish to speak and haven't yet completed a sign-up form, please do so and hand the form to the staff. The forms are located on the table by the doors. If you're attending remotely and wish to speak on a matter that is not on the agenda, please raise your hand on Zoom at this time. I would like to make everyone aware that the city does have a policy on public meeting decorum. The rules are posted on the walls just outside chamber entrance doors. In summary, I would ask that everyone please be pleasant and respectful, not making derogatory statements about others, including city staff, not be disorderly or disruptive, no calling out, clapping, or holding up signs, etc. Please note that the commission cannot take testimony on any specific planning or land use related matter or application outside of an official public hearing. This time is for general comments on topics not included on the agenda and for comments only, no questions or debate. You may contact the mayor or staff during general business hours if you have any questions or concerns. When it is your turn to speak, please state your name and whether you reside in the city limits. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone signed up to speak during the general comment time?
Nobody signed up during the general comment period.
Any hands raised on Zoom?
No hands raised.
Okay. Last chance. Okay, moving on. Next, we have a public hearing and recommendation decision on amendments to Sandpoint City Code Title 9-1-3 Definitions, 9-4-1-3 Residential Single-Family Development Standards, and 9-4-2-3 Residential Multifamily Development Standards, 9-4-4 Rural Residential, 1, and 9-4-5 Rural Residential 2, pertaining to building footprints and impervious surface standard. If you wish to testify, please complete a sign-up form and hand it to staff. We will begin with a staff presentation followed by commissioner questions. Then we will open the hearing for public testimony. After the public hearing has been closed, we will proceed with commission deliberation and a recommendation decision. I will now yield the floor to Community Planning and Development Director Jason Welker.
Thank you, commissioners. I'm going to do my best to also monitor hands on Zoom in case Fonda, our attorney, or Commissioner Torpy have any questions or comments during this presentation. But we'll start with a brief PowerPoint here to go over the amendments that are being proposed to our building footprint and impervious surface standards. And then we'll go into some questions. And I've got City Planner Building here. Obviously, he was integral in helping with this amendment and with the staff report that you had in your packet tonight. So we're going to start with just a little overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to present a proposed amendment to these standards. We're going to explain the rationale for replacing what are currently two different standards in our code relating to lot coverage with a single standard. We're going to discuss the impact on housing form and neighborhood character, and then through the public hearing process, we're going to gather input from the commissioners and from members of the public who might have an interest in this topic. So let's go into what our current code includes in terms of lot coverage standards. And we're only going to focus in this presentation on RS, that's residential single family, and RM, that's residential multifamily. The rural residential zones 1 and 2 have a single standard for building footprint, but not for impervious surface. So they're not all that relevant here. We're not actually proposing much of a change to those two zones. And just factoid, we don't even have any rural residential 2 zones in Sandpoint. That's a potential future zone. So our purpose statement in the existing code is what you see here. The purpose statement points out the bulk of structures, the height of structures, the desire to prevent structures from overwhelming adjacent houses, and defining the character of neighborhoods, essentially. One of the problems, though, is that with this 35% and 40% building footprint maximum articulated in our residential single family and residential multifamily zones, we have actually created a situation where building height tends to be taller than it might be otherwise if we had allowed a larger building footprint. So, of course, square footage needs to go somewhere, and on smaller city lots, which we do allow lots to be created down to 5,000 square feet in the city of Sandpoint, you're going to see in some examples on future slides that 35% is a very small building footprint. Does not allow for the development of a housing type that is in very much demand in this housing market. The maximum building footprint is only around 1,700 square feet. And when you account for garage space, for porch space, for covered decks and things like that, you might end up with only around 1,000 square feet of living space on the ground floor. So we're going to go into some more detail about that in a moment. Secondly, as I'm sure Bill would love to elaborate on, setbacks, not lot coverage, are a better tool for addressing bulk and neighborhood character. Bill, do you want to talk a little bit about setbacks and how building footprints and lot coverage are not really how good zoning and code address bulk and scale?
I do, but let's get through the presentation first, and then let's see where the questions lie. And then I think we're gonna be better suited if we go through all the examples first and then come back.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just one quick clarifying question.
Commissioner Simmons.
Yeah, the 40%, we're talking, that is the surface area on the ground, right? So if you've got a 5,000 square foot lot, this says just what is the area on the
That can be
ground.
occupied by a roof over a structure,
okay.
yes.
Got it.
Now, in our code, we allow for an additional 30% of impervious surface
That's what I
in
was getting
single family and an additional 40% of impervious surface in multifamily. So you can see on the right of this table, the current maximum allowed in code for impervious surface, combined building footprint and asphalt or any other paved patios or parking areas or things like that, driveways.
That's confusing.
So it's a little confusing.
Yeah.
So you can see even for our
Yeah.
planning commissioners, it's
Yeah, yeah,
confusing.
yeah.
It's confusing for planning staff, and it's often confusing for developers as
Yeah.
well. So this is what we're proposing we do. We go to a single impervious surface standard, eliminate the building footprint maximum, and adopt a unified standard for RS and RM of 70% lot coverage. Now, on our minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet, what would that look like? That would mean the maximum building size, okay, would increase from 1,750 square feet for RS to 2,600 square feet, and from 2,000 square feet to 2,800 square feet in RM. Now, keep in mind, that's the absolute maximum, assuming no other impervious surfaces are utilized on the property. Of course, pretty much every house in Sandpoint is going to have a driveway or a pathway connecting the sidewalk to the front of the house, or a parking area in the rear. So that's a maximum, kind of an extreme scenario where no other impervious surfaces are utilized. So we're going to go through some more realistic scenarios on later slides.
First floor max.
Sorry, yes, first floor max. This is not square footage of the house, but we would be increasing the maximum allowed on a single story house, basically. Of course, you could add more on second floors. We are also proposing to amend the purpose statement to kind of move away from this language that really is better suited for setbacks, and provide some updated language that you see here. So we're really talking about building into our code some greater flexibility for new development and for redevelopment of older houses, to support neighborhood livability and character, and to, again, ensure open outdoor character of residential areas is enhanced. So that's the proposed updated purpose statement. So why is this change needed? We've got some constraints that have emerged from our current code. Modern home design is a big thing here. There's this concept of aging in place, right? People want to buy homes that they can grow old in. What kind of homes can people grow old in? Generally speaking, that's single floor homes. Yeah, single level homes are better suited for an aging population. Not many of the buyers moving to Sandpoint are looking for two-story homes anymore. Limiting building footprint almost requires homes go taller, as opposed to using the property that they sit on for dwelling space, as opposed to other not impervious surfaces. We view on the team these regulations as being somewhat redundant. We already regulate height in all of our zoning districts through maximum height limits, and we regulate bulk and scale and air, light, and open space through our setbacks. So why have a building footprint standard as well? There are many, many homes. I didn't do a count, but I'd estimate in the dozens, if not hundreds, of lots in Sandpoint that have an existing structure on them, but would not have space, given our building footprint maximum, to build an ADU in the rear. If you have a relatively small home on a smaller city lot, you might be at 25 to 30% of your total lot size just with your existing home. Good luck building an ADU when you only have 400 square feet to work with of additional building footprint to use. So loosening or eliminating that building footprint maximum and going to a single impervious surface maximum would open up the opportunity for more infill housing. We've always talked about ways to incentivize. This code, not only, it doesn't just disincentivize ADUs, it actually makes them impossible for possibly hundreds of property owners in Sandpoint. And when we receive building permit applications, when we receive site plan review permit applications, it's just one less calculation the developers and the city staff have to do when reviewing those applications. So it could streamline and make our review processes more efficient. Okay, time to get into some examples here. Are there any questions before we jump into examples so far?
So in terms of the suggestion, you're saying that, hey, let's have a blanket rule. You can cover 70% of a lot with man-made stuff. It can be house, can be driveway, can be porch, can be whatever. That's ultimately sort of.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Now, interestingly, you can already cover 70% of lots with man-made stuff. We're just telling you
Yeah.
only half of that can be living
Yeah,
space.
but you're-
Half
yeah.
can be pavement of some sort.
Got it.
Okay. So here's an example. This is a 5,000 square foot lot, 50 by 100 feet. You can see the setbacks. These are the maximum setbacks or the minimum setbacks in our code. The red outlined structure is the current maximum building footprint. That is 35% of the property, 1,750 square feet. You can see how that's broken down between garage space, living space, and a modest front porch. So you can see right away that the maximum, with a kind of a modern new construction where 2-car garages are pretty standard, the maximum amount of living space that can really be accommodated is just over 1,000 square feet. The elimination of the building footprint standard, the adoption of a single impervious surface standard would allow for a maximum, as you can see here, assuming there's no additional hard surfacing on this property, increase in that structure's first floor footprint to an additional 850 square feet. So keep in mind, however, that you can already pave over that entire additional, in fact, there's no setbacks for hard surfacing requirements. So that any hard surfacing could, or impervious surface could extend within that setback. The setbacks now determine the maximum building size allowed on this property, not the maximum building footprint standard that we have in code. So that's one example for you here. In all of these in all the examples in the next few slides, the red is going to be the maximum allowed under current code, and the blue hashed area is going to be the maximum increase allowed under the proposed amendment. And one important point here is that no change to the home's character has been experienced from the public realm, from the street or sidewalk. In almost every scenario, amending this code is going to result in development happening in the rear of houses. The setback, most development takes advantage of the minimum setback in the front of the house already. So you're unlikely to see additions going on in the front of houses. Most often that's going to take place in the rear. Okay, this was a request from Commissioner Weber. He said, okay, well, we see a 5,000 square foot lot. Show us there's a lot of lots in Sandpoint. In fact, most lots in Sandpoint are larger than 5,000 square feet. The minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet is relatively new development that we see most of those in. So this is kind of a typical South Sandpoint lot, 6,500 square feet, 50 feet by 135 feet is a typical sort of South Sandpoint lot. So we've got here an example where the red outlined is the maximum building footprint allowed under current code. If we went to a 70% impervious surface, the combined red plus the blue hashed areas plus the hard surfaced areas represent 70% of this lot. You say, well, what happened to the rear setback? In this example, we're looking at an alley accessed ADU. You can imagine there's actually a 1 foot setback for garages accessed by the rear alley. So that ADU structure is allowed to be within the 15-foot rear yard setback since it is alley access parking. So this is another example. You can see considerably more living space is accommodated by eliminating the maximum building footprint standard. And again, there's been no change to the front of the property. It's all additional living space in the rear. One more example, and that is residential multifamily. So what about, in this case, a 22,500 square foot lot? That number was chosen intentionally. That represents 6 historic substandard lots of record, which are 3,750 square feet each. There are quite a few properties like this around Sandpoint. In fact, we're going to hear about one of them later tonight. So this is an example of an attached multifamily housing development on 22,500 square feet. We looked in code, Bill and I, and we said, well, how much actually could be built on a lot of that size? The maximum number of units able to be accommodated in an attached housing project on a lot that size is actually 11. But that's a lot of houses, and given our current building footprint maximum, 11 dwelling units on a lot this size would result in units that are only around 600 square feet of footprint. So this is kind of a more realistic 7-unit example. You can see the red, imagine townhomes, single-story townhomes here with the front porch. The red outlined areas represent the maximum size that could be accommodated on this over half-acre lot. The gray areas are hard surfacing to accommodate rear access parking from an alley, some pathways accessing the rear of these units, some front pathways going out to the sidewalk. So taking into account the existing hard surfacing on this property, this proposed amendment would allow for the increase in living space indicated by the blue hashed areas. So it's around 9,000 square feet across the 7 properties. That's not the right math. I did that wrong. 450 square feet per property. So keep it in mind that under the proposed amendment, the actual amount of impervious surface would be reduced from 80% of the property to 70%. Currently in RM, hard surfacing can take up 80% of the property, but only half of that can be for living space. So when we talk about affordability and infill development and increasing density to promote affordability, By limiting building footprint size, we're really limiting the amount of living space we can put on the land that we do have in our residential zones. Okay. We did have a request from a commissioner to show an alternative. So one idea is, well, what if we didn't go all the way up to 70%, but we said, well, we're willing to increase or eliminate building footprint standard, but we're more comfortable with something more like 60%. So I gave an example here of what that would look like. So in our single family 6,500 square foot lot example, you can see the diagram on the right shows the increase in the amount of living space possible if our standard were 60% instead of 70% impervious surface. So still doing away with the building footprint maximum, but actually reducing the impervious surface maximum from the current 65% to 60% rather than increasing it from 65% to 70% would still allow for an additional, I think that's 790 square foot of living space on the ground floor. In this case, in the form of a slightly smaller ADU in the rear. So you can see basically the difference between the example on the left and the example on the right is that we've eliminated 650 square feet of building footprint by taking that addition off the rear of the house and shrinking the ADU. 650 square feet is 10% of the total lot size. Okay. I don't see any hands up on Zoom. Does anybody have any questions about these examples so far? Why don't we finish the presentation and we'll jump into questions. So in every presentation to this body, we look for consistency with our adopted comprehensive plan. So we dove into the comp plan a little bit, and these are some examples of how we believe this amendment is consistent with our comp plan. Keeping in mind that we already allow hard surfacing to occupy 65 to 80% of our residential lots. We're really just making a value judgment here and saying we're going to leave it up to the property owner to decide what that hard surfacing is. Is it the roof of living space, or is it going to be something else? So that's an important consideration here. And we did actually run this by our engineers. I will admit, and I'm sure some of you are thinking this as well, Commissioner Torpy, there must be some reason for the maximum impervious surface standard that relates to storm drainage. Our engineers assured us that this has nothing to do with stormwater management. Impervious surface standards are not an engineering standard. They exist in the zoning ordinance because the purpose that we have them is the purpose that was stated in code. It has to do with building bulk, height, scale, things like that, neighborhood character. Storm drainage, we have 0 setbacks across all 3 of our commercial zones. So if impervious surface standards are required for stormwater management, then how come we allow 1/3 of our property in Sandpoint to have 0 setbacks and are actually require them to build up to their property lines? So current code limits property rights. It allows expansive hard surfacing where living space might be preferred and forces development on small lots to go upwards. And it precludes hundreds of Sandpoint residents from building ADUs because they're already up against their building footprint maximum. Some of the benefits we see in this: simplifies code interpretation, expands housing design and flexibility, preserves neighborhood scale, aligns with the comp plan, and as we said earlier, streamlines permit review. So with that, we do recommend that the Planning Commission recommends amendment of the relevant codes here to City Council. You do have alternatives, of course. You could recommend modifications, you can deny, and we can stick with our current standards. So as with any public hearing, the next steps are to listen to the public, listen to your feedback, incorporate your feedback, and bring an amendment to City Council for consideration in the future should you wish to proceed. So I'm going to actually, I'll leave it open in case you have questions about the examples. I can see hands on Zoom here, so if anybody listening has a question, please raise your hand.
Okay, first, do commissioners have any questions for staff at this time?
I do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I do. Early on, you
Commissioner
had a
Torpy.
slide.
Hold
Can
on
you
one
hear me
second,
okay?
Scott.
Hold on, Scott, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay,
Go ahead, Scott.
okay. Early on, and this has nothing to do with the proposal. It has to do with the information in the proposal, because I assume that this information is going to be presented likely presented in a similar form and content to the city council. So early on in your slides, you had a table that showed existing and future maximum size of a single family residence. And I wondered about the calculation in that. I think the reference was 2,600 square feet, maximum building or roof size. Given that the example was for a 5,000 square foot minimum lot size, 70% impervious surface would imply a total impervious area of 3,500 square feet. So there is 900 square feet that's not accounted for. I assume part of that is an assumption of a driveway size area. But in the examples that you gave later on, I think you showed a driveway that had 450 square feet total area. And so is it accurate to say that the maximum size of the roof on an RS lot of 5,000 square feet would be 2,600 square feet? Or is it simply dependent on other uses of impervious hard surfaces?
Bill, I'm gonna hand this one off to you.
So also to tack onto that question,
Yeah.
why not 80%?
Impervious surface?
Just coverage, just in general. I mean, answer Scott.
Well, I'll give you one reason why.
Where does it break?
We actually ran some calculations for various lot sizes. Setbacks alone consume on average 28 to 31% of lots. So going up to 80%,
Okay,
you're
it's not
never
fair.
going to be able to develop 80% of your lot unless you're in a commercial zone
Okay.
where the setbacks are zero. As you scale up the lots, obviously the dimensions of the lots increase. The 15 or 20 foot front setback and the 15-foot rear yard setback and the 5-foot side yard setbacks generally are between 25 and about 28 to 31% was what I found on different lot sizes. So going up to 80% lot coverage, what's the point? In fact, what's the point is a question we discussed extensively in this process. What's the point of impervious surface standards, period, if setbacks already govern bulk and scale? So that's a good question. I'm trying to think about, so let me just share my screen again. We did have a wager, Commissioner Torpy, over how long it would be before you found an error in my math. And I would say you probably found it faster than any of us could have expected. But that's what you're on this commission for, is to
That's our Torpy.
keep us honest when it comes to our math. It's quite possible, Scott, that there's just a calculation error there.
Yeah, I just didn't want to, yeah, I think that's the one I'm looking at there.
You unmute you, Scott.
I just didn't want the city council to think that is necessarily the maximum. I can imagine someone could build a single or any home that has a roof size bigger than that and still meet the impervious surface standard on a 5,000 square foot lot, given a small driveway.
Could do.
That's all I wanted to say. Otherwise, I am completely in favor of this. I have no problem with this whatsoever. This is a great idea.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't want to take on my calculator in a meeting here, but it's possible there's a mistake on this table. I think looking at our examples is probably going to be the better. I ran these numbers multiple times, so these are some better visuals that represent.
Yeah, I think it's probably safer to stay away from the math as relates to any one particular scenario. There's just too many variables, honestly, when you're talking about the overlap between an impervious surface and the building footprint. And when you cover up a lot and the assumptions you make for the length of the driveway, or if the driveway is going to be, accessed off the alley or off the front. But that being said, we very well could have screwed up the math on the table. That's
I think I know
altogether
what you did. If I can just add one more thought, is that the garage in your examples is also 450 square feet. So I think what you meant by that table that I'm referring to earlier is the living space, not the total building size, but the living space would be on the order of 2,600 square feet, because then you've got a 450 square foot garage and a 450 square foot driveway equaling 900 square feet plus 2,600 square feet is 3,500 square feet, which is the maximum. So just the heading of that column, you may, if that's your intention, you may want to just change that to living space, to use the same terminology in this example that you've got right in front of me now.
Great advice, and when we bring this to council, we'll make sure it's clearer.
Okay, that's all. That's all. And again, I don't have any other thoughts. This is a great idea.
Commissioner Dunkel.
Commissioner Weber.
I just had a question about like the scale of this residential single family zone lot sizes. Sounds like in the future, more developers are developing 5,000 square foot lots. But a lot of the current lot sizes are larger than that square footage. Do you have an idea the current lots that exist in Sandpoint today in residential single family that are over 5,000? And in the future, how many may be right at 5,000? And, you know, and as
I
they
don't know if we
develop.
have any numbers on that, but a quick look at our GIS map, you'll see kind of the parts of town where lots are in that 65 to 6,700 square foot size. That's pretty much the typical South Sandpoint lot. In the central part of Sandpoint, those are mostly platted in the, substandard lots. So you have more of these 3,750 square foot lots, but most of those, or I shouldn't say most, many of those have been combined with short plats to eliminate a lot line. So you have a lot of 7,500 square foot lots.
Okay.
On the other hand, many of those, what appear to be 7,500 square foot lots actually still contain the original lot lines in the middle of them. So could in the future be split back, not split, but could be utilized as 3,750 square foot lots. We're going to hear about one of those projects later tonight. So there's really no typical city lot size in Sandpoint. You have hundreds and hundreds of tiny lots of 3,750 square feet, which are below what's even allowed in code now. That's another opportunity for infill. There are special standards for those substandard lots of record. These maximum building footprint standards do not currently apply to those substandard lots. I want to point out there's like a whole section of code that deals with standards for. They have smaller setbacks, for example. I don't even believe they have a maximum building footprint. So this is really those 5,000 square foot or larger lots that we're talking about here.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just kind of say a little teaser at what my thoughts will be later on, but just a lot of the South Sandpoint single family lots are quite a bit bigger than 5,000 square feet. And so I do see the potential to build out 70% of those lots could be pretty impactful on those neighborhoods that have been historically very much a single family neighborhood with large backyards. And so this has the potential to really overwhelm, for that original language, overwhelm the adjacent properties with the large building that maybe it was 30 feet back into the lot. Now it's going 50 feet back on both sides of your neighborhood, of your neighbors. So just something to think about tonight as we discuss this, how this will impact the single family neighborhoods of Sandpoint today. Less concerned with the residential multifamily, but just one concern one aspect to consider.
A lot of bulk for a big lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any more questions for staff from the commission? I think we can move on with the public hearing, which if you wish to testify in the public hearing, please complete a sign-up form and hand it to the staff. If you are on Zoom and wish to testify, you may raise your hand at this time. City policy provides that the presiding officer may allow gifted time during a public hearing, where you may gift your time to someone else. The person gifting may do so only once, and the person receiving time may only receive one gift for a total of up to 6 minutes. There's some more of that math. That one checks out though. If you are gifted time, please state as much when you begin speaking and state the name of the person who gifted you their time. Both parties must be present here in chambers. Madam Clerk, has anyone signed up to speak?
Yes. First one is Levi Snyder, not a city resident.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Levi Snyder. I do not reside in the city of Sandpoint, but I have been involved in remodel construction my entire life. I'm a third-generation contractor. My grandfather But for the last 11 years, I've been based here in North Idaho and have worked with a variety of jurisdictions, both in Bonner County and Kootenai County. I want to start off by saying that Sandpoint is a unique community and a beautiful community. And it has a unique aesthetic that it seeks to purvey through its design standards and through its communities. And I believe that in my attendance at planning and zoning, at city council, I continue to hear, how can we either replicate or continue either housing that benefits our current residents, or how do we replicate some of the standards that we've seen in South Sandpoint into North Sandpoint? I want to speak in support of this revision, specifically on impervious surface revision. The current code creates a dichotomy that forces current Sandpoint residents to choose between living space, garages, carports, and patios, which all count against the same ratio and ultimately limits what they're able to do with their personally owned property. The proposed revision would allow current residents to better age in place through the ability to remodel their homes, something that in the current economy is more and more advantageous. It would allow them to better utilize their property rights, either through the ability to actually take advantage of ADU standards or building detached carriage houses in their rear yards, something that in conversations with city staff is something that we would like to see more of, not a bunch of garages all facing off against the street, but promoting that, parking to the back kind of standard in design, giving people the better ability to move vehicles off of the street into rear yards, et cetera. In regards to new construction, I have been a part of and ultimately working to better design product for Boyer Avenue for the University Place Phase 3. And one part of this that's exciting about this aspect is that our lots are not, a 5,000 square foot lot. They're 7,700 square foot lots. They're not a, substandard lot. They're not even a minimum standard lot. They're good sized time and a half lots. By the current design standards, with a 450 square foot driveway, 400 square foot, 50 square foot garage, 120 square foot back patio, 100 square foot front. It only leaves just under 1,600 square foot for a living space. That's not much. And we're talking beautiful lots. These should be a prime design and that appeals to existing and new residents for Sandpoint. But this current design really limits what people are able to do with their property. So for those reasons, I would recommend approval.
Thank you.
Next, we have Luke Gonzalez.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Luke Gonzalez. I work with a local building company in Kootenai County as well as Bonner County, and I've been with them for around 5 years. And in the time that we have been doing homes in Sandpoint with the current code in place, it affects quite a bit of the desires that homeowners currently have now, changing what they're wanting to do with their current properties, as well as the new development as far as what can be placed where. And so when working with the planning staff every day and where did I go here? Working with the planning staff and city officials daily to figure out what design we can come up with that best represents the South City of Sandpoint, as well as what's desirable for homeowners currently. There's a gap that we haven't quite been able to bridge with desirability versus what fits the code standard. And a lot of that stuff comes down to people having covered patios, even having a back patio at all, the sizing of garages, getting people to be able to park off the street. If we don't have garage parking, that increases street parking. It also directly affects the ability for us to build age-in-place homes for people having their forever homes. It affects with the spacing we need for certain areas, like having 5-foot clear radiuses in bathrooms for people to be able to spin wheelchairs around, and accessibility and whatnot. And then with the current codes that are in place as far as setbacks, this isn't pushing what you can already put onto a home. You have to adhere to the front setback to the home. You have to have your 25 minimum to the garage. It can't be changed as far as what those are going to be, or what those are currently. Those aren't going to change. So when you're putting these homes onto these lots, you're creating yourself a more desirable plan that for you as a homeowner or you as a future homeowner will be able to continue to do what you want to do in your private sector while appeasing the city and their public sector as far as street facing facade codes go and all the different requirements to go into keeping a house looking the way it's supposed to look in the city of Sandpoint per the way you guys set that code forward. I think that's all I got for you guys. Thank you for allowing me the time.
And you do not live in the city?
I do
limits?
not live in the city of Sandpoint,
Okay.
no.
Thank you.
Next, we have Teague Mullen, not a city resident.
Thank you, commissioners. My name's Teague Mullen. I've been a resident of Sandpoint for 30 years, and I currently sell real estate. And I think everything was well touched on, and like the report was very well done. To kind of add to it, it really comes down to what property values can be for somebody that has something like in South Sandpoint. So if you own a lot in South Sandpoint and you are struggling to make your mortgage or whatever, it's like giving an ability to add income to somebody's family. So I really feel the diversity and the property rights of these people that have these houses and that have gone up tremendously in value to offset the cost of what they're paying for mortgages, and today's rate is like, it's important to give the city the best option to where it's like you have options, you can do more with your property, you can make it more valuable. So I really believe in everything that was said, everything that Levi and Luke said, but furthermore, it's really giving the rights that I think that the city owners deserve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else signed up to speak?
Nobody else has signed up and no hands are raised.
Okay, if anybody else would like to speak, we would give you an opportunity to sign up and get up and do it now. If not, we would move on, and that would be the last opportunity before the hearing is closed. Okay, the hearing is now closed. Commissioners, you may ask questions of staff during your deliberation. And if anybody had a motion, I would entertain that.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner
There's
Simmons.
still not anything limiting the height. So getting back to Reed's notion in like South Sandpoint, we got a 10,000 square foot lot. You cover 70% of it and you can go up 35.5 feet. You've just built a massive structure that's completely within the rules, within the bounds. That is unlike anything else that's built down there. I don't know how to limit it, but nothing's stopping anybody from doing it. You know what I mean? So I think it's a bit of a consideration, because I get the notion of property rights. There's all kinds of things I'd love to do with my place. But if I'm the neighbor of that, I'm probably not too happy. I guess it'd be my sort of 2 cents, because it does and I don't know how to address it with like lot size and how to scale it up and down. I don't know if we address height as an option, but it affords a pretty goofy property on a big lot. That would be my one consideration.
Commissioner Benner.
Oh, I'm just sitting here thinking, just on my own personal property, I could just about triple the size of my house. Cause I've got a big lot.
Yeah.
And a small house on it, so. And then, like you say, if I go 2 stories, that's a huge, huge place.
2 stories is like what, 20 feet? You could keep going, Wayne.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes sense though for someone to add on to their home. If they do want an additional bedroom, larger
ADU.
kitchen.
Yep.
ADU.
Yep.
Like having a provision for that, especially residential single family. That should be allowed in some fashion, and it might just be taking that 70% number and maybe doing more of the 60% that was recommended or that was offered by the staff tonight for the residential single family.
But on a smaller lot, I could have, like I don't know whether we look at this versus sort of lot size, but that again becomes sort of discriminatory. So, yeah, I don't know where it breaks.
Right. Yeah, I think for a 5,000 square foot lot, 70% makes sense. But yeah, for a 10,000 square foot lot, does 70% make sense there in that case?
Is this resonating with staff at all? Is it making
Oh,
sense or are we?
oh, absolutely.
You guys have probably been
we
through this
have-
already.
We've had quite a discussion at the staff level, just in terms of, where did the standard come from to begin with, right? What's the purpose of it? And we read the purpose statement, but these numbers came from somewhere at some point. And we just basically, the conversation evolved around basically the idea of, what are the things that are most important? We know the way we have a lot of rules about how a lot has to be organized. Some things have come to be, well, we understand, really non-negotiable. You've got to have a 25-foot long driveway if you're going to access your property from the street, so you can get the car, not interfering with the sidewalk. That's sounds like that's not really something that there's a lot of appetite to tweak something like that. The idea that the front of the house can only be occupied by, so much garage, 50% or less of the facade, so that we don't have this garage dominated streetscape. So those are important things that are reinforced through policy discussions and the comp plan and things like that. And what brought us to this to begin with was just the experience we've had in talking about, well, what are people asking for? I want to do an addition. I want to do a covered patio in my backyard. I want to do an ADU, and lot coverage was in a lot of cases the limiting factor. So we began asking ourselves, well, what's important here? And it came down to, well, there's this concept of the public realm and the private realm. The public realm, what we all experience as we drive down the street and walk down the street, and the idea of the proximity or not of those porches, and what types of features are on homes as we all experience walking up and down and driving through the streets. Very distinct look and feel that you have here in the neighborhoods. What happens in the backyard, something you can't see typically, little less important in our conversations at the staff level than the stuff that was happening up front by the street. And therefore, maybe there's some ability to look at these lot coverage rules to see if we can't accommodate. But I think a good point is raised. If you're currently experiencing a large backyard and your neighbor has the same scenario, and now your neighbor comes in and doubles the length of its house, that's gonna be impactful. There's no other way to describe it. I think the example where this takes I would say the scenario where this is the most impactful would be if you had a situation where somebody wanted to access their garage off the alley. In the RS zone, you can go to 1 foot off the alley, so you don't even have that 25 garage. Now you've got a lot of square footage to play with structure because you're not taking it up with impervious surface with a long garage. So make no mistake, this could result in some significantly larger homes, but it also provides significant amount of latitude to others who may not have the desire to build something like an ADU in their backyard, or a covered patio, or a kitchen addition, or something like that, or a room addition. So it's hard to, I think it's all of the above. It's all of those things. And the question then becomes, well, is that something we want to move in the direction of or not? And I think this conversation is intended to arrive at that. And we spend a lot of time in that purpose statement. What is the purpose of this? What are we doing here with these rules? Trying to hone in on and looking at the comp plan and what it said, reflecting what is articulated as what we like about these neighborhoods. We like the trees. We like the garden-ness of how green Sandpoint's neighborhoods are in the trees and things we have like that. So these trade-offs between that and providing this flexibility so that you can have more living space.
Yeah.
So that it just comes down to that. And I think all those scenarios are possible that you talked about. One way would be to try to limit the RS zone being a little different, being characterized by larger lots, predominantly in the southern portion, to say, all right, maybe that standard's a little bit different than RM. I think that idea would mitigate against that, but it certainly wouldn't remove it. Especially pick your lot, pick your scenario. Is the garage going to be accessed off the alley or not? If it is, then maybe you're going to have a big house anyway. But it definitely lowering that allowance for lot coverage certainly addresses that in some way. Does that help at all? Give you a little bit of context how we're thinking about this?
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Torpe has his hand raised.
I'll come in on mute, Commissioner Torpe.
I've got, I think, 2 points or 2 questions. One is concerning the relative importance or supremacy of one rule versus another. And I'll start with what I think I remember the purpose of this revision is, and that is to add flexibility, increase the opportunities for people to make the highest and best use of their property. But it is not supreme. It's not, am I correct when I think that it's not an entitlement? It's not a guarantee that you can build a 70, a gigantic house that is out of scale with the remainder of the neighborhood. There are other rules in place that prevent that or discourage that. Am I correct?
Bill?
Not entirely. And the reason why is because a single family home just has to meet the, is exempt from the site plan review permit. One way to look at it is this, is the code with a site plan review permit, which is basically a land use permit that is required before you get a building permit, only is triggered when you're doing 4 or more units, in which case the character of this is going to be looked at. Or in the context of downtown, the zone district itself for commercial zoning talks about the character, but expressly exempt from, looking at the character of the community is the fact that you can do a single family home on a single lot with just a building permit. You meet the setbacks, you meet the other requirements for the garage sizes and things like that, and the building permit is issued. We're not looking at the color. You can have a pink polka dot house. You could have an extremely pitched roof next to a house that's got a flat roof. When you're at scale of 4 or more, the code establishes 4 or more. Now that has the potential to be block changing, street changing, neighborhood changing. So you have a land use permit and thus a different bite at the apple that the city takes in terms of context sensitivity. So on a single lot on a house, you're not going to have that necessarily, given the current structure of rules we have on the books today.
Well, thank you for that. I'm glad you corrected my assumptions. Now, the other is to reduce the impervious surface allowance from 70 to some other number, and maybe only for single family, the RS zone and not the RM zone, perhaps, as was suggested. Would that, in your opinion, change or address the concerns that have been raised by other commissioners regarding sort of the out of scale concern with the surrounding properties? Would reducing it from 70 to 60 or some other number, in a sense, guarantee that that would not happen?
I can respond to that. I'm just doing the simple math, right? If you take 10% away, you're gonna, in a 6,500 square foot lot, reduce the potential expansion by 650 square feet. That's not nothing. I mean, that's the size of a 3-car garage, for example. So you can imagine there's one less 3-car garage in your backyard if you reduce that standard by 10%, give or take. There's still like what combination of impervious surfaces and structure, building footprint makes up that. And in an extreme example, 60% of, let's say, just a 5,000 square foot lot, you're now up to a 3,000 square foot building footprint with 0 walkways, 0 parking spaces, 0 anything else, no patios. So if you go to that extreme, you could still see these relatively massive structures on relatively small lots. Whether that's a product that anybody's interested in putting on their property is a question, right?
Does the market support it?
We've all heard the term McMansion. That term got bounced around a lot in our conversations about the impact, possible negative impact of this. I don't think we want to see McMansions in Sandpoint. Just these dominant structures. Do we fear that? If so, maybe we need to consider keeping regulations in place, but that's really not of the character of development that we've ever seen here. I haven't seen a movement towards that sort of McMansion style of construction in Sandpoint.
One more
It's really
question. Thank you,
about,
Jason.
You know,
Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
Ivan, you're still muted. This is really about the freeing up opportunities for property owners to use their property in the way they best see fit, whereas our current code allows them to use it for very specific things. You can put asphalt or concrete or other impervious surfaces, but you cannot put living space on your property beyond that 35%. So we're already,
You can
there's a
cement it over between.
kind of a
the
heavy
living-
hand of government right there, right? We're telling you exactly what ratio of your impervious surface can be living space and what ratio is allowed to be some other impervious surface. I'm gonna unmute you now, Scott.
Yeah, I guess I'm just looking for your opinion. I think I can guess it, but do you think that, given the concern, the potential for out of scale, out of character homes being constructed in neighborhoods, that it would stand out and look out of place? Given that possibility, overall to the community, is this, does this present an overall benefit to the community in terms of the flexibility that individual property owners have and the ability to develop what might be considered more affordable housing for people in terms of accessory dwelling units and so forth, or aging in place, you know, addressing those. Does the overall benefit clearly in your minds, or does it not clearly? Is the overall benefit clearly greater than the risks that have been presented here?
I'm going to mute you again. I think that's our staff recommendation is to move forward with this, and I think that's an expression of our opinion on that. I'm going to bring it up. Bill said we should bring this up tonight. I was at the candidate forum last night, and Councilman Aspiro, who's running for his third term on City Council, had a great line on a question that was posed to all the candidates about how do you see promoting affordable housing in Sandpoint? And Joel said, there's only two ways to get affordable housing in Sandpoint: density or subsidy. And subsidy is not something that's hugely popular in this, you know, conservative state. But, you know, liberalizing our regulations of land use, that's what we're talking about here, will promote density. I mean, just the availability for, you know, hundreds of property owners to now build ADUs on the property where it's not possible under the current regulations. Additional living space is living space. And there's a direct correlation between the supply of living space and the cost of living. So in one way or another, allowing greater density on these lots is going to, over time, drive down the cost of living space in Sandpoint, because the supply will be greater. When some percentage of those are additional dwelling units, you have more dwelling units, meaning rents are going to be, I'm not promising lower, but it's going to moderate rents when you have greater density. That's the only path to affordability. So this is not, the underlying this is not, you know, our presentation tonight wasn't about how do we promote affordable housing in Sandpoint. We're not proposing that this is going to do that, but to some degree, the benefit conveyed to property owners and their ability to expand the number of dwelling units in Sandpoint through this amendment, I believe is worth it. And just generally giving property owners the freedom to do what they choose with their property, rather than the city telling them that they can or can't do one type of impervious surface over another. That's my opinion. Bill?
Well, you're the boss. Just kidding. No, this is something we should be fussing over and talking through and be very, you know, deliberate about what we're doing. I think all of it is true. I think what the big question here is this going to result in a character change? I think that's what I hear from, you know, members of the commission saying, you know, okay, this is interesting, but is it going to represent a character change such that it's not worth, you know, taking this leap? Most of the effort that went into this was looking at it from the vantage point like Jason's just described. Haven't seen development of scale that where we've had people come to us and say, look, you know, these houses are monstrosities, they're too big. I mean, right now there's some large lots in South Sandpoint that haven't filled up. I don't think this is going to open the floodgates, but I also, you know, remember all land use is local. At some point, these rules were put in place and are probably different than the rules that preceded them. And if we find ourselves faced with this being a bad idea because it results in a bunch of big mansions, that otherwise wouldn't be there, or something that's undesirable, we can always go through a process to take another look at it. I think Commissioner Member Weber was onto something when was trying to sort of distinguish between the RM and RS zones, knowing that there's just larger lots in RS generally. So maybe it stands to reason that going to a lesser standard might be a more incremental way to approach this to see what the result looks like. So I think that there's I think that's I'm interpreting that as an expression of wanting to be cautious, because you don't know if it's going to result in a character change.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Simmons.
So I'm sort of curious as to the plurality of like the square foots that we're talking about, because we're talking 5,000. Is that most of what we're talking about? Or is it mostly around 7,500? Or like what is sort of the median lot size we're trying to address here? The reason I bring that up is does it make sense to, the things I love about what you guys have put together is you've removed you can live on it, you can pave it. It doesn't make any difference. It's 70%. Like just removing that as stricture, I think is really important. You get a rule, you can do with it whatever you want. It can be home, it can be pavement, whatever, 70%. But does it make sense to above, let's say 7,500, that now goes to 60? That would be my question. But it's 7,500, to me, that's arbitrary in my head. I don't know what the plurality of the square foots that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I mean, that's certainly something that could be looked at. I mean, if the commission's interested, we could do a little bit more work to try to understand.
I'd be curious in it, but I mean, in terms of putting something in front of city council right now,
Yeah.
like divorcing the prescription of living versus impervious and any of that, I'd be super comfortable with that, like right now, while we take a look at this other stuff.
We could do a little bit of testing. We don't have an easy way to just grab the lots. It's gonna take some work to figure out, what the numbers are. But I understand what the commission's, nibbling around this idea of, well, let's maybe understand
Not
something
meaning
better
to
for.
prescribe a bunch of work if
Right.
most of what we're talking about is 5,000 square foot.
No, I think it's worth taking a look. I think it's worth, let's get comfortable with understanding, what really is the difference here we're talking about. Is the average 7,200? What is that? I mean, we could, with some work, we could get that figured out and to see if we can't, bring that back to round out the discussion a little bit.
We actually did a bit of a shallow swim on that this afternoon on GIS, just going across South Sandpoint looking.
Eyeballing it, yeah.
I lived 7 years in South Sandpoint. I lived on a single South Sandpoint lot platted in the 1920s, and it's 6,700 square feet.
Okay.
In my neighborhood, there were a couple double lots, which would be around 13,000 square foot
yeah.
lots. I can't imagine somebody coming in and wanting to build a 9,000 square foot house on a 13,000 square foot lot. First of all, you'd probably be one of the richest people in Sandpoint if you could afford to build something that large. But what we're really, I think the applicability of this, the beneficiaries of this amendment are more likely going to be those on the single lots,
Okay.
not the double
All right.
and the triple
We'll
lots.
keep that in mind.
Now, when you get to the multifamily, that illustration I showed for multifamily, that was a meaningful and not overbearing increase in
Yeah.
size, right? Because in multifamily, you have to have off-street parking requirements are in our code for multifamily, X number of spots per bedroom in your units. So there's going to be a parking lot in multifamily. It's going to take up some percentage of your property. So I would, going back to Councilman Weber's suggestion, I would suggest, I would support that over I would, trying to create like a scale that's
Rule.
kind of regressive, and
Gotcha.
the larger your lot, the less of your lot you're allowed to develop.
Yeah, okay.
That in a single family zone, that's going to be that tiered system would be very difficult to administer. And I would think possibly be challenged by property owners. How come you're discriminated against me, but my neighbor who has a lot that's, I don't know, in some cases it might just be, I'm on a 6,700 square foot lot, my neighbor's on a 7,000 square foot lot. You let them, because 7,000 feet is the cutoff you decided on, to build an additional, so that you end up with that arbitrary like cutoff, that cliff where, one property owner feels discriminated against over another.
Yeah.
So I mean, I support Commissioner Weber's suggestion to go with a single standard for RS and a single standard for RM. We currently have different standards, right? RS is currently maximum 65%. RM is maximum 80%.
Oh, is that what it is now?
Yeah, maximum impervious in RM is already 80%. So we're actually proposing decreasing the maximum impervious in RM.
But
just
removing
going
the
to-
language around livability
Yeah.
and space. Okay.
So going to 70 was just something we thought, make it 70 across all zoning districts, but we currently have different standards for RS and RM. So if that's what the commission wants to recommend, that's totally reasonable.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Benner.
And just thinking of like the Moran subdivision, I mean, there's 30 some lots, and I think they probably all average over 10,000 square feet. Now, some of the homes on there are probably close to 10,000 square feet because they're on the waterfront. They're McMansions, if you want to call them. But I can see that, I mean, that whole subdivision, those older homes in there, if they got tore down, you could start to really create quite a different neighborhood effect in that, without having something a little bit smaller maybe in that area. And then the other question I have, if you go with this and you look at it after a year or so and it's not working, are we going to have a legal issue of trying to go back to it because now you've got a taking of people's property?
All land uses local, these ordinances change from time to time. There's going to be, we just amended the parking ordinance. These standards change. You shouldn't take it lightly, but like, we could have Fonda weigh in, and I don't believe that's the case. As long as you go through an ordinance and you properly adopt it and you go through the process to articulate why it is that you're doing it, cities can make adjustments to these rules to hone in on what is befitting for their communities, and staying well clear of takings issues.
Fonda, you're on.
I agree. I would be more concerned about applying a code change in a specific area of the city. That would be more problematic than without an overlay district than taking a look at revising a code change in the future after, trying it out for a year or so. So I think Commissioner Benner, the only thing you said that really concerned me is you highlighted a specific area of town and then maybe made a suggestion that we apply a different standard there. That we can't do without an overlay district that has its own requirements. But we certainly can change code now and revisit it a year or so from now after evaluating how it has performed.
Thank you, Fonda.
Go ahead.
All South Sandpoint's impervious when you look at it.
Yeah.
Well, the clay lies only a
That's
couple feet below the soil, and that is impervious. So.
Question, you're in the RS zone, you're required to have off-street parking.
You are, yeah.
So your driveway
It's
is
based
gonna,
on the number of bedrooms in your unit. And actually going no, that's just downtown. Yeah. Correct.
so that surface does have to be impervious?
There are alternative surfaces allowed per the engineer's discretion, such as turf stones, things like that.
Hard
but-
surfacing though.
Hard surfacing, yeah. Whether that's pervious or impervious, that we went through that in our
Mhm.
9.5 parking, off-street parking requirements with our city engineer Brandon at the time. What are there impervious surfaces or are there pervious surfaces that can be used for parking facilities? So are you getting at the developer may, pave all their parking with pervious pavers so that they can build a larger structure?
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm getting at is in the current standards, is there the ability to manipulate some of that language in order to get more square footage on a single level, like not having a garage and using that space as living space?
Off-street parking requirements do not require garage parking, right? You can have off-street parking spaces. Generally, those are going to be impervious surfaces and will count towards your 70% or your 60%.
Is there variance available if somebody did want to hypothetically go from the current standard to close or potentially close to the proposed?
Well,
'Cause I think we've-
Commissioner Dunkel, I think you and I were on the commission when a variance request came forward for
Yeah.
an exception to the max building footprint standard.
And I think we said no.
They ended up cutting holes in the ceiling of their house
Yeah.
to achieve the 35% maximum.
Hmm.
That case has been discussed in our preparation. of this.
Yeah, that was the first thing I thought of was how different things are in a few years and during that, not that I know the exact details of that, but we were pretty set on that this is the rule. And so I wonder if the variance opportunity would open the case by case. Maybe not, but because it feels weird to say that this is okay on every lot.
Yeah.
You know, because some lots, and I'm not gonna say just square footage is the only factor. I think there could be, you know, topography could come into effect maybe in some places, or, you know, if it is 5,000 square feet, then I think, yeah, maybe you probably should get more, but if it's 10,000, then I guess it makes it, I think it starts adding the element of the opportunity for a very large house is all of a sudden something that we would definitely hear about. And I'm thinking about the one ADU that shocked the town, and we did a bunch of work to try to change the ADU standards so that we didn't have that happen again. And then we we tried to make downtown, you know, commercial area, you know, parking situation different. And then we had a, you know, kind of a situation with that where it bit us, you know, where somebody had no parking. And so I think one standard that fits all for like so many different size lots and so many different neighborhoods. And I hear what Fonda says about, you know, we can't just make one neighborhood different than the other one, but I think my biggest fear is that there is a giant house next to a bunch of smaller houses that are, you know, and it does change, like you said, with the RM zone, it does change the neighborhood when there is a very large structure put in next to a bunch of smaller structures. So that's the part I'm probably having the hardest time with. And I'm also in favor of like people being able to use their property for, you know, the most possible that is allowable, as long as it's not, you know, having too much of a drastic effect on the immediate neighborhood, which we have those standards too of, you know, I think mostly in RM where, you know, you have to step down, you know, to the neighbors next to you. So I see that as kind of an element of it too of, you know, and then we're getting into height also, which, I think this kind of maybe magnifies the height issue a little more in some cases, not in everyone, but, it definitely has the potential for it to be that way. So I'm not real strong in favor or not in favor of this, but I do think maybe after this discussion, maybe there's a couple more tweaks that could be done to, I do like that impervious, whether it's a roof or a driveway, I think it's kind of, you know, either way, it doesn't really matter to me. So maybe that helps a little bit. I think the 80% is up there. So
We have a couple people on Zoom.
Jason?
Fonda, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, we want to be really careful with the conversation around the variance. Variance has a legal definition that relates to bulk and scale on the lot, and I think, Mr. Chair, you kind of danced around this a little bit, but it's an inability of the lot to perform under the standards because of something related to the lot, not that the landowner doesn't like the requirements, and so they want to have a deviation from the code. So I think we want to be really careful there. And second to that, I think, be mindful in the conversation that even under your current zoning and the current rules that apply, what you're talking about in bulk and scale is somebody taking the roof off their house and going up 3 stories and all of a sudden being imposing. Well, they can do that now. So these regulations are an attempt to, I think, be a little more standardized, and I don't want to overspeak Bill in relationship to this piece, but be mindful that you have regulations in place that could allow that to happen now. And so you're not creating something that's different than what could currently happen.
And then Commissioner Torpey has his hand up as well.
Commissioner Torpey.
Yeah, hi, I had to move, so maybe you can't even see my face with the backlighting. Sorry. Hey, on the subject of height, I think I know the answer, but I just want to get it out in the record. The bigger the home, let's say you have a 6,000 square foot home, can it be taller than a 2,000 square foot home? Is it allowed, just because it's bigger, is it allowed to be taller?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any more questions or deliberations for staff? Or
I guess my one question to staff is, what do we think about a potential split between multifamily, single family in terms of the bulking? I love the idea of removing the livability constraint and having a 65, 75. I don't know what that split looks like, but does that make sense? If we take a look at that.
I do. I think if the commission can nod or whatever, let me know. It's really, we're talking about the character in the RS zone specifically of larger structures, because those are the RS zone is typically where you see the larger lots. Is that really to put a finger on the main issue? Is that really the main issue? Because that helps us go back and kind of noodle on what.
I think it's where my head's at. I don't want to speak for
Is
everyone.
that more or less where the main sort of thrust of your, that gives us something very specific to go back and work on.
Yeah, and I'm not meaning to delay this anymore. I think we're very close to.
I think this is the whole point of coming here, and this is the whole, your role is to weigh in on these things so that when we go to city council, it's as well thought out as it can be. Yeah.
So that's where my head's at.
I'm with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's also just getting those living in South Sandpoint today, hopefully they're watching this, or they'll see it in the news this week. They might speak up over the next week too and get more of their input. Those people already living there.
Yeah.
All right.
agreed. So we have no recommendation, so we will.
Yeah, so is there any motion we need to make here? Are we tabling it for
Well,
further?
public hearing's been closed, so what we're gonna do is we'll have to renotice this for another hearing, because we're gonna make some adjustments to what we've presented this evening, which is great. We'll go back and do some additional work and have that follow-up with you. It'd probably take us a month, given the fact we got the noticing provisions.
Fonda.
Yeah, I would prefer, since we posted this, the way we posted it, and it is a public hearing, that the commission make a motion to amend the draft language as presented by the commission tonight and send it back to staff for further analysis and revision. So I would recommend that they take action on this and send it back to staff for further revision.
I would entertain a motion to do that, exactly as Fonda stated.
Let me take a stab at this here real quick. Want me to
Commissioner
speak to
Simmons.
that? All right, I make a motion to amend the draft language and send back to staff for further revision for review in a future council meeting.
Future
Commission-
planning and zoning, it'll come back to you.
Does that work, Fonda?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Will this be a roll call vote?
Yes.
I had it down as a roll call vote,
Yeah.
but I don't know moving.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Benner,
Yes.
Commissioner Weber,
Yes.
Commissioner Simmons,
Yes.
Torpy,
Yes,
Commissioner Torpy, Commissioner
yes,
Dunkel,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay. Okay, moving on. We have no old business, so we will move on to new business, which is a design review for 1331 Church Street. I will now yield the floor to Eric Brubaker, Associate Planner, for a presentation on design review required for the construction of 1331 Church Street. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Glad to be here tonight. This is my first time in front of the Planning Commission as your associate planner. We will find that this particular project in front of us tonight, as I get it up on the screen, I'm gonna just pass it to Bill for a moment to introduce it because it's a little different than most of what comes before this body.
Sure, good evening, Chair. So it is a little bit different. So just a few moments ago, we talked in the context of the hearing on the standards, well, what sort of constitutes that threshold where you've got a site plan review permit. What's interesting in our code is this is very unique provision that just applies to development on substandard lots. If there's going to be development of more than 4 units on substandard lots that are next to each other contiguous, they, in addition to getting a site plan review permit, is during that process, the commission has to put on its hat and not issue a permit, but rather do what's called, what the code calls design review. So what's going to happen this evening is we're going to be asking you to just put on that design review hat and weigh in. It's not an approval or denial. It's a review and make some commentaries relates to the design. I think where the standards and that requirement is coming from, probably put in place when the RM and RS zones were created to begin with and had the 5,000 square foot minimums. Applying that zoning over the top of a lot pattern that had a lot of small lots. They said, oh, let's make sure these small lots, when they develop in any numbers next to one another, have got this additional scrutiny as it relates to just making sure the design sort of fits. That's the best I can think of where that code provision might have come from, is just to elevate it to the commission to say, hey, before we allow 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units contiguous to one another, there's just some review to see, how these look. So Eric's going to walk us through that. It's not a permit. It's basically a review. So there's no like a approval or denial in this case. It's really just weighing in on what you see and the property owners, and staff receiving that feedback and working with that. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Eric.
Thanks, Bill. Mr. Chair, I have a little report here. I'm hoping folks were able to look at their packets a little bit because I'm not going to read it staff report word for word. We're going to try and focus on kind of an overview of the project, why we're here, some examples of projects around the town. And we also have the applicant here, and I think it'll be an opportunity for you to ask them questions. It's not a public hearing, but in a design review, I think we're going to be a little more conversational than you might typically be, because I'm going to be working on the fly to try and basically compile what the commission puts together. So let me just work through this and then we'll hand it over. Let's see here. All right. So the project before you tonight, it is 1331 Church Street, which is at the intersection of Church and Division. This project is before us because it is on 6 substandard lots of record. Substandard lots were platted. Most of these were pretty much similar dimensions, a similar block size. These were done primarily at 25 by 142, but conveniently out on Division Ave, the westernmost lot is platted at 30 by 142, which actually allows them to have a little bit more room there to meet the setbacks and meet the requirements to not have to split that lot horizontally. So from your staff report, we basically broke this out into the process, and the bulk of the process is our standard site plan process, which is administrative, but there is extensive design review requirements. There's public infrastructure requirements, and I will be compiling a staff report based on agency feedback. Those design requirements that are outlined in city code, but there is a piece that is for the planning commission acting as a design review body to help us with what's really the gray area in this type of thing. So moving forward, just a quick overview. Zoning is residential multifamily. It's on division. It is an area of town where, according to the comp plan and so forth, there is ample access to schools, libraries, bowling alleys. Those are the big three. And it's an area where the comp plan basically wants us to densify, intensify, and allow for additional residential units. Across division is mixed-use residential. And it really is kind of the entryway to the neighborhood in a way. So Church Street, this was in block 48, and you'll see we're working with 6 of those original lots. And it just so happens the way the section lines worked out that you see this. We'll talk later a little bit about the Walnut project, which was similar configuration, and there's a 30-foot lot on the end. But this is the original plan, Church Pine Division before it was division. The prior land use on the property was a mobile home court of same density, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they were oriented towards an internal street. One of the things, it's going to come up, but I'm going to use this picture to do it, is the entire frontage here is proposed for frontage improvements, and that would include eliminating this large curb cut. And all the lots will be reoriented to their original configuration.
And is that alley on the south side there?
And then this is the alley on the south side. My mouse is slow in this format, but there's a line of arborvitae there, and that's where the ADUs will access off the alley. That's right.
Yep. Nice.
So I'm going to take you a little walk down Church Street, because really what we're talking about is how our neighborhoods look and feel, how the street looks and feels, and how the blocks interact with each other. And I was able to pull these off of Google Earth, although they were in the fall, so it looks like it was today. That starts at Jefferson, but you'll see some ghosts there. Heading towards Washington, westbound towards the project. Crossing Jefferson, approaching the project. And the project site is on the left. I think people are pretty familiar with that location off of Division. So the impetus and legislative intent, from what I could tell regarding substandard lots of record, is a couple of things. One is, if you have a lot in the city, we can't with zoning say you can't do anything with that lot. And so municipalities in Idaho, yes, you can build on it. And a lot of them said, yes, you can build on it, but you have to follow the rules that everybody else has to follow. And the results weren't necessarily great. And over time, people had some concerns about different aspects of the way substandard lots were being developed. So the city has explicit code provisions for substandard lots of record. And I got a couple of different examples of that type of development. Basically just to get your juices flowing. One of the things, we can come back to these, but the elements of this that are pretty much the same on every single project, these are structural elements, right? The support posts for the porches, the roof pitch, the entryways, glazing windows, siding treatments. So we'll get to that. More recently, we've had people develop under our current ordinance. And this is a two-pack that did not require design review, but was built to our substandard lots of record process and our guidelines. This is another example. This project, I believe, from what I could figure out, was maybe one of the only ones that was brought forward under the code section that we're using tonight. So I think folks are familiar with that. It's kind of an example of the sidewalk view. And it just so happens, thank you, Sarah Gilmore, when I was looking for precedent and other projects, she had some slides that I was able to borrow, and I tried to use that design later on. But it also gives you an example of what has been constructed in the past. I'll make a couple notes on this. One thing that stood out to me was like every one of those garage ADUs in the back is almost exactly the same. And interestingly, they were all higher than the front units. And then you will see, I think this is interesting, the height scale on there, that's 24 feet. So this is a project at hand. And in your packets, you have the plans, and there is a lot more detail in terms of the description of the elements of these houses. But the overview is they have one plan that's 17 feet wide, and that would be, let me move over here, that would be this one. The 17-foot wide plan meets the 5-foot setbacks on the outside, which is the easternmost lot. And then the rest are 19-foot wide, which meet our 3-foot setback because of building fire code. The result ends up being a lack of eaves on these homes, and that's one of those things that happens when we have, you know, we want to reduce the setbacks to reduce the tall, skinny look, but as a result, you lose your eaves. So that's just something to think about, maybe now or maybe when we look at the way we write our rules. So the overall plan, basically, it's very straightforward. It is 6 lots. One thing of note is we have a special setback requirement on the front for multiple units being brought forward at the same time. This is something I will be handling in my review, but there is required to be something of a difference on adjacent lots. So the frontage of these will have to have a little bit of a modified setback, and that's something that you all don't need to look at tonight, but you should maybe consider it in terms of what you do come up with.
Do you mean modified from the church side?
I'm really struggling to get my mouse to point to what I want it to point at. But from the church side, it's the front yard setback in the substandard lots ordinance. If you do multiple lots, there needs to be some staggering. And you saw that on the Walnut project where the frontages were staggered.
Yeah.
So just, I did the same thing. Roughly the 17-foot wide is on the left, and that's coming in at about 26 feet even. And the 19-foot wide on the right is coming in at about 27 feet. So I took this out of your staff report, but the bottom line is the design guidelines for substandard lots. That's what we're here to look at tonight. And it's a little bit overwhelming to us as planners because this is kind of a very open-ended type process. And when I started to work through it, it's really pretty simple because most of these are check the box or not. So one, homes shall have a front door that faces the street. Well, every one of these faces the street. Two, in lieu of street facing front door, the applicant may construct a prominent front porch, yada, yada. They have a front facing, they face the street with their front door, so that doesn't apply. The meat of what we're doing is really three, and I'm going to read the whole thing. Detached dwelling units shall provide a facade that substantially differs from the facade of adjacent structures. Variations in materials alone will not be considered sufficient. The unique facade may be obtained through the use of structural changes or through the use of substantial design elements. In addition to complying with the preceding design guidelines, the front facade shall include multiple design elements such as multi-paned windows, varied roof lines, dormers, bay windows, wainscoting, a covered front door, a usable front porch, or other elements as approved by the commission or staff that create a unique facade. Articulated designs may repeat on non-contiguous lots. And then there's a number 4 for attached units. Buildings should be oriented towards the street. This entire project does. And stormwater will be addressed by our public works when they review the project. So really we're down to 3. I tried to boil it down to, we are here because of the gray area. The things highlighted in gray are the gray area.
So if I'm understanding, what this says is the house can't look like the house next to it. Is that what it's saying?
That's
Seems weird.
basically
Okay.
what it's saying. So at this point, I can bring up the plans in detail or using what you guys already have. I'd like to kind of broker a discussion. Maybe the best way to do that would be for the chair to go along and ask each one of you what their thoughts are.
Commissioner Simmons.
To me, when I saw this, and thanks for putting the pack together again, appreciate it. It was all fairly well baked. To me, these look like great designs and a land use that made a lot of sense. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents on it. It seemed like the right design for the right part of town. These things will get gobbled up. Is it like? So the fact that it needs to vary from like, that's not something that we've enforced generally, I would say.
Well,
But
to be clear, like I said, there was only one other project
yeah,
that really met that threshold.
yeah,
And what you see is a lot of projects that are
right.
1 or 2. And where we cross that line of 4 is where we're required to
Review it.
have this
Got it.
more
Let's chat.
extensive level of review. And I think you can imagine if someone were to buy a whole city block, they're basically a full-blown developer at that point.
Yeah. I'm curious on what Reed has to say. Where's your head on this? You have a much better sense of this than I do.
Commissioner Weber.
I was just gonna ask if there is an elevation across the whole block. Are they currently proposing
So
creation? There's not an elevation across the whole block, but I believe there's no reason we can't get the applicant involved, correct, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, it's a design discussion, and just to put some more meat on that bone, it's a discussion. The conclusion can be, we discussed it and thank you. We did, we don't have any comment, or, proceed. Thank you for bringing it to us, or please consider this change or that change, or, so there's a fair amount of leeway here. So having the applicant come up is I think fine.
Another question, while you have the plans up on just the depth of the front porches that are currently shown. Let's see. Hard to tell from the scale, but.
Hmm.
Do you got? Ethan, do you know that number, the depth of your front porch? I believe. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Zoom in on that floor plan.
That's what you're asking.
Yeah, so he's asking for the covered front porch and it appears to be a concrete stoop and it's 4 feet to the inside of the posts and 1 foot beyond. And then it looks like the cover over the door extends a little beyond that.
Let's bring the applicant up and maybe we can get a little more clarity to some of the questions we might have. Are you willing to come up?
Yeah.
You can both come up if you want. So who are you and where do you live?
So my name is Ethan Azan. I live on 13-6 Church Street. This is my mom.
Across the street. from
Lisa
Lisa.
Hazan.
Okay,
My name's Lisa Hazan and I live on Labina.
okay, so you're gonna have to live across the street from this.
I am.
Okay,
I'm
that
a- I-
actually helps. That helps,
Yeah.
helps us feel way better about things.
I guess the question for you then, do you plan to vary the elevations?
That's kind of just
Your design.
dependent on what you guys think. I mean, this is what we proposed. This is what we were thinking. And you know, we do have to look at it every day. So
By elevation, do you mean, you don't mean that, you mean
staggering the foundations, yeah.
O's, okay.
Well, yeah, if staggering the elevations as you step back from the road or changing like the substantial structural elements like window shapes, roof shapes, posts and things.
I mean, we're not opposed to it.
We didn't know that was required and this was our design for all.
Okay.
Eric,
Suggestions?
I heard just asking if that was your intention or not too, because it seems in the code language, it's written there fairly clearly whether or not it's going to make the project better or worse. You know, I think there's a lot of amazing projects that look the same next to each other. But I don't think that,
Personally, I'd rather see that.
yeah.
Yeah, but
Okay.
personally, I think the staggered, in some way, it doesn't exactly have to be like the setback and the height.
Sure.
It could also be like, the covering over the front porch or, some sort of dormer, or some kind of facade over a window does make a difference, or a difference in the gable shape or a little more of a roof overhang, especially if you went, they're not allowed to go, the overhang is limiting, right?
on the eaves.
Yeah, because of
It's
depending,
limiting because of the setbacks that they chose. So
yeah,
which we allow building to the maximum encroachment on a small lot. But if you go to that, that's where you land. So there is a possibility you could stagger in another 17-foot wide home and do an overhang, for example.
so if they're 17, they get some leeway for the eve, but if they're 19, then it's 19.
Right, because the eve counts
Okay.
when you're talking about fire code.
So we technically could have a 1-foot overhang on all of them if they were all 17 feet.
Oh, gotcha.
Hmm.
Okay.
I mean, I think the overhang looks great. It's a small amount of difference, but it also is removing 2 feet of living space.
Yeah.
So that's a factor. I don't know. This is a tough one, I think, because I don't want to tell you how to how to build your homes, but,
Or to start limiting space based on design.
yeah.
division. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and but I will just say this, I think there are some projects that have happened in the past that they're not very visually appealing. And I think most of the problem is that they all look exactly the same and they're all very tall and skinny. And so the design standard was pretty much non-existent. Or the design standard was, you know, what was the quickest, easiest way to put it up. So I think there's ways to make them look more appealing and not look all the same. Um, of course, like flip-flopping the doors or something like that. I don't know. I'm just
Sure.
speaking from,
Or maybe possibly adding an awning over some
Yeah.
facing windows.
I think that, and I think staggering them, you know, the setback. Do we have leeway to manipulate the setback to, or is it really going to make much of a
Well,
difference?
I mean, we actually are required to. But it doesn't say how much it is. And, you know, as planners, we wouldn't want extensive staggering. So it's kind of a fine line. I think my take on the intent there is to not be absolute cookie cutter
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
situation. That's what I think the intent is. And I think we can meet that with, you know, you could do a subtle stagger where you move one or two next to each other back and have a little deeper porches, and it would, with very little change to the plan, make a big difference and meet our code.
I'm thinking about if the setback changes, then either the depth of the house changes or the space between the house and the ADU changes.
Yeah, there's room for the space between the house and the ADU. We do require an open space in the middle, but they're not pushing that. In fact, you see it on the 17-foot lot. They actually have more living space.
Mhm.
Or is it equivalent
It's
living
just-
space?
It is
It's just
equivalent,
longer.
it's just longer.
Just
So
longer.
You see that jog there between the foundations, adjacent on the 19-foot structures.
17 feet is tight.
It is.
Yeah. I think whatever you do is going to be great.
Yeah.
As long as, I think the stagger, I mean, a foot or two probably makes a big difference. And then, and I don't think that affects, you know, your cost of building or anything like
Not at
that.
all.
So, and it's not going to change like how much yard people have, because frankly, this is probably not a place that's going to have much of a yard anyway. So I'm almost in favor of like commercial setbacks, honestly. I've been to cities where there was almost no setback to the sidewalk, and I didn't think it was a problem. If we want to talk about affordable housing, I think those are things that some cities are dealing with that make sense, which maybe helps in some areas, but I don't think we're talking about that exactly right now. I do think height, that was it the 19-foot wide one, the height is a little bit taller by a couple feet or more?
It's only a foot taller or less, right?
Just because they're wider.
25 versus 24. It's not
Just
bad.
because same pitch of the roof.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
It's kind of tall. I have a building that's has 20-foot ceilings, and the peak of the roof is like 29 feet, but it is 50 feet wide.
Yep.
So that's as tall as I would want to see, I think. And you know, roof pitch is probably not something you're going to be able to change. So, any other commissioners have any more sound advice?
Well, no, actually, I think, I look at them, and since we have some just down the road that look almost exactly the same way, I think that fits real well there.
That's where my head was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just
Well,
say-
it's an improvement from what was there.
Almost certainly.
I'll just put in, I think it's like overall a great project, like the scale, and create some more affordable housing than what, you know, other options are available.
Our intentions weren't to pack them in there. Certainly, in our initial meeting, we kind of got the impression that that's what they would like to see. The city would like to see, you know,
Density.
the used as substandard. And, so, you know, with that.
I think with the front elevations, I think those porches being, you know, 4 feet to the column and 5 feet overall, if you did have the space to actually have like, 6 feet is like kind of the minimum you want for like outdoor seating with like a table, and maybe there's even like, a dining table or like really engage that street front with that front porch. So if you could potentially just extend that out, just offering it up as an option.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's an easy.
That would be a better selling point, I think, for people as well, to have a larger front porch. And then with the eave overhangs, I know with code, there's potential ways to block and fire rate your eaves for your overhangs. If you were to extend beyond that, that'd be something with your building. Talk to the building department about if you, some added cost with framing with that, but that might be a way to extend your eaves into that setback. I mean, there's different with planning setback requirements and fire code requirements too, right? So.
Yeah, and I did speak to our building official about that. He talked about, you could wrap them with hardy and everything else, but it's like, I think one of the keys is to get the best design bang for our buck, because there's the affordability thing too. And so there's a lot to think about. And I think, I don't see us going to anything heavy handed. So I appreciate just the way the commission's looking at this.
And they will be spacious. They're 2,000 square feet, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so.
Pretty big.
Commissioner Torpy has his hand raised.
Commissioner Torpy.
Oh, we gotta do the thing with the thing
Uh-oh.
over here.
Hi.
Hold on, Scott.
Hold on,
You
Scott, we
might
gotta
have an
figure it
issue.
out. Local AV expert Jason Walker's gonna figure it out.
Was he on Jason's mic?
He was.
Try speaking now, Scott.
So I can turn this.
We
Scott,
good?
please go ahead.
Okay. If I could just review my memory of that paragraph 3 in the list of things that the commission is tasked with commenting on. And I think it said that each facade shall be different, right?
Yes.
And
it
that
says
they can
substantially
alternate.
different.
So you can have design A and design B, I guess, and you can alternate. If I'm reading this correctly, tell me if I'm wrong, okay? But you can go A, B, A, B, A, B, across the whole thing. But they need to
You're
be,
correct.
they need to be substantially different. I may be the outlier here, and I want to acknowledge that and go along if that's the way it should be. But the code says something, and I'm trying to understand, to me, and they give examples of what might constitute a substantial difference from one facade to another. Bay windows and certain dormers and other things. So is it our task? I assumed that when we saw this design, we would see design A and design B, and we would be able to say yes or no, sort of check the box, like, as was described earlier. But given the fact that I think they're all exactly the same, except for one is 2 feet narrower than the rest, I'm not comfortable telling somebody how to design their project. But my understanding is that we should look at what somebody says, this is what my interpretation of the rule is, and I think this complies with the rule, and tell me what you think. And I don't see that happening here.
So I'll speak to that briefly. That's the gray area that substantially differs. That's what this body needs to determine, and there's ample leeway to do that.
But if I might just debate that point, is there any difference, let alone substantial difference? Is there any difference in the facades of, the 6 homes, with the exception of the width? Is there any difference?
No.
So 5 of them, no. One is different.
One's different
But it
by
is not substantial,
shrinking.
so that's
Yeah.
some of the things that have been talked about, including porch depth, including eaves potentially, and what else? What would you throw in there?
See, that's what I don't want to do. I mean, my job is to, as I interpret this paragraph that we're all looking at, is to say, yes, that is substantially different. That's great. You know, that constitutes a substantial difference and that meets, you know, what we're asked to do. I'm not an architect. I don't know what's feasible, what it costs, why it should count more than some other change. I can't do that. But all I can see is that they're not different and we're just kind of throwing things out there.
Well, I think we are, let me just weigh in to help out with this a little bit. I think it's a great point. Having been through countless design review discussions with commissions over the years, this comes up a lot. I think what I've heard so far is the commission arriving at exactly that. Taking a look, talking about how to create a little more interesting streetscape. The setbacks have been talked about. Porch depth has been talked about. I don't think the conversation's over. I think someone made mention of you know, the eaves, the width of the buildings. I think that what commission can do without designing the building is provide feedback. For example, you know, ensure that you have an A and a B. For example, maybe the porch design has got, instead of columns that come down, the porch is returned into the facade of the house. We can have you know, a commissioner on, you know, that has some experience in the vernacular of these things to create a style. For example, maybe it's the wainscoting is one. Some of them have brick, half of them have brick, and the other half have stone, or some of them have no way, you know, none of the materials at the base. You know, those are the types of things that can be articulated by the commission to arrive at, you know, substantially different. It doesn't mean the whole house has to be redesigned and not have the gable roof, although that's certainly an option as well, to have a house that doesn't have you know, a roof design like that. But you know, that's a more of a substantive thing. But I just encourage the commission. You sound like you got the juices flowing here, but those are the types of things, you know, what would be sort of in the kit of parts to make one different from the other without getting too specific, but just say generally, please modify X, Y, and Z, and we think that's going to be enough. I think that's about as far as you can go with this.
Okay. Okay. If that's how that section of our code and what we're tasked to do is interpreted. I have one more thing. It's not on the subject of facades, but it's on the subject of actually paragraph number 1. And it's the second, excuse me, subparagraph number 1. And it's the second sentence of that says, if the lot is on the corner, then the front door faces the dominant street. Now, I don't know what the dominant street is, but Division is a much bigger street, I think, than Church. So not that I think it's a great idea to put the front door of that one building facing the west instead of the north, but what are we supposed to do with that?
Scott, do you remember the old plat that I showed you?
Mute your computer.
Yeah. Yeah, the old plat showed 30 feet or something. Yeah.
What the dominant street is. So the lots all face Church.
So that is the
nature.
dominant street. Okay, that
Division is bigger, so it's more of a road, less of a street, and the dominant street would be Church, and it's also seen up and down the street, so you can look at how all the other buildings orient.
Okay. Thank you.
I got a question. So as far as, you know, like mediating the problem here, like would we be able to just maybe, let's say, instead of doing a 5-foot patio on all of them, maybe we stagger them. We have an A and a B, and A is a 5-foot patio and B would be an 8-foot patio. Could that possibly?
It's somewhat arbitrary at this point, being honest. We're all sort of grasping at things that what makes it substantially different.
Sure.
And I could almost argue that making them different's actually going to make them look worse.
Sure.
Right? I mean, you could probably wrap.
I mean, there's beauty and symmetry.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of us, I mean, to check the box, we have to say that we've discussed this. It sounds like we've got some ideas in terms of some potential changes, and you just brought up 2 that I think probably fit the bill.
Yeah. As
a proposal. You know, I don't think we have a spirit to be super heavy-handed with, like, yes, come up with 6 distinct designs.
Sure.
A little difference between A and B, I think, probably gets us there. What do we think?
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, I'd love to have total control over the design of your project, but we can't do that. And I think we spent some time and we were going in that direction with um, design standards for a much more of a Sandpoint, and that kind of went away.
Yeah.
Although I don't think it's a bad idea as far as like, if you're gonna sell these, they're gonna look better if you make them look better. And I think people are really gonna want to live there if they look really nice and they feel like they're proud of where they're gonna be. So I think the location is great. I think uh, we're in one of these situations where the definition doesn't really give us a clear, defined, this is how it is. It says, it gives us, I think it motivates us to have a discussion like this, and I think we all get the intent. So I think you got the point. I think you guys are gonna have to review this anyway, right?
I mean, what I need to get across the line is just, if you pick out a couple of things that the builder seems willing to work with, and then they can propose those, as long as, okay, say porches is one of them. Say the covering over the door and how that gable interacts with the porch is another, and say eaves are another. If I have 3 or 4 elements that you all can kind of agree on that seem to work for the builder, then we can get it across the line.
So what do we come up? We come up varying setbacks, eave treatment, gable treatment, porch sizes. Is that 4?
Awnings,
Awnings.
wainscoting.
Look at this. We got 6 of them now.
Maybe a shed roof instead of this
I
roof.
mean, those are all pretty easy things. to
Okay,
work with.
nice.
There was another one which was mirror imaging, but
Yeah.
these guys did a really good job. It's not part of what we're doing here, but you'll see they have the closed side and the open side of the house, which allows privacy and also light. And there are good design qualities in this that aren't really part of what you guys get to look at tonight.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Benner.
just one thing on the eaves, I'd be real careful unless you've got a very good system for catching water at that height, you're gonna be dumping water on the other lot. So I think the eaves may be kind of, be careful
Well,
on it.
that's what the 3 foot's all about, whether it's a 19-foot
Gonna be in the
wide
house.
building footprint or a 17-foot wide building footprint. The eaves have to be 3 feet from the property line no matter what, and that's what they're proposing regardless. So that's not really.
Boy, you'll be dumping water next door.
You good with that?
It all sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay.
Let's wrap it up. You good, Eric?
Yeah, I think I got what we need. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Guys.
Appreciate you guys hanging out and
Thanks for-
spending all your evening with us.
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. We'll be in touch.
Man, 5 years, I have not done that.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, like we mentioned at the onset, it's a strange provision in the code, and yeah, we'll be having lots of discussions about design stuff as we get into commercial and historic. So stay tuned on that.
Okay, now we can move into our final items. Are there any general matters that staff would like to bring to our attention at this time?
Just that we were making some progress, working with, or just providing updates really to the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission on where the historic overlay and some of the design standards are going. There's a flurry of activity at our offices to try to get that ready for your review. It's a substantial ordinance. This is a big change in terms of creating the architecture to attach a new overlay.
Oh, this is
And
for the overlay.
For the overlay for downtown, it's an immense code amendment we're gonna be bringing you. Right now it's at 23 pages long. So we're gonna be sitting down and reading a lot of code together and getting into a lot of things that may not seem like they're related to historic preservation, but it's about creating the right architecture structure in our code so that we can attach the overlay and the permitting that goes with that appropriately. So that's just a little quick update on that.
Does that include the heights of buildings downtown?
It's gonna include everything.
Oh, that's a lot.
At one point, there was like discussion of hiring out a consultant to do something very similar. Is this basically you're taking that effort on, or we're doing that in-house?
We're taking this on at the staff level. We don't need consultants for this.
Roll your own.
Yeah.
Good. Just double checking on that.
How things have changed.
You'll see, this is, it's gonna be the driest code sections I can assure you you have ever read. But there's a lot of meaning to them and they're very important. And then, I'm really looking forward to working with all of you on this. It's gonna be a roll up your sleeves type of moment.
Well, we can always change it if it's
That's right.
not good.
We can always change it. We can always change it.
I mean, we'll be cutting out a roof and then we'll be adding a roof back. So what's the generational amount of time for a code to last or to be changed or what? It's like a great idea and then all of a sudden, so many years later, it's everybody hates it.
You're gonna see, comp plans every 10, 15 years, gonna get updated, and you typically look at your zoning ordinance in earnest, but honestly, the zoning codes, they're hard to change. Some of these provisions have been around for a long time. We took a big bite, with you and council on the parking. That was a pretty substantive overhaul, alley standards and coming up with new standards for downtown, expanding exempt areas. That was a pretty big change. So prior to that, it had been over a decade, I think, since it had been.
16, I believe,
Yeah.
2012 maybe.
And that amendment had a lot to it. And about 4 or 5 years preceding that, there were some of the standards have been in the books for decades, plural. So it really, there's so many standards, right?
Yeah.
But it's time to take a holistic look at this. It really is. What happens over time is you've got standards mixed with procedure all over your code. And it's almost the point where some of that stuff in the residential zones, for example, you can't read it. It's very difficult to find out what the standard is. It's just too mixed up. And that just happens with amendments over time. So a lot of what we're going to be doing, I think, is reorganizing and clarifying, but not necessarily changing standards in most cases. It's just making it easier to read, putting tables in there, for example. You're going to get a real good flavor here pretty soon later this year when I bring you the zoning administration chapter. Can't wait. It's a biggie. We're going to have fun with it, right? It's a biggie though.
Well, I think you better hurry because we may only have like 3 more meetings this year, maybe 4.
Right.
So this year is drawing to a close fast.
Well, we'll be looking at it this year together. It's certainly not going to be ready for adoption. This needs to be, we need to study it together. I mean, it's going to take more than one meeting to read through it.
Okay, with that being said, is there any, do commissioners have anything for topics for a roundtable discussion? Or are we ready to go?
Thanks for showing up.
I think we're good. We can adjourn right now. 7:41. Wayne?
Thanks.